What's up, everybody? It's Dakota, and today, before I go over this sweet deck, a deck that I've probably played the most over any other deck throughout every format of Magic that I've ever played, real quick, I just want to talk about the schedule for the rest of this week. So this is going to be going up way late Wednesday night, so sorry about that. But then the next two decks, which are going to be the Pioneer and Standard, are going to be going up Thursday for the Pioneer deck and Friday for the Standard deck. Just kind of doing it in the same order, but in a different way from how it usually is, or how I wanted to do it for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Also, I'm going to be putting out just another video, probably on Friday, Thursday or Friday, one of those 2 days, just to kind of make up for not uploading the last few days, or at least having it be a while, probably at least a week, something like that. So I apologize for that, but now let's get into the sweet deck. Grixis Death Shadow. The deck that I started playing Modern, or really started playing Modern and started taking it seriously, it's probably my favorite archetype of all time. I make jokes about it all the time, but it's probably my favorite. It creates the most fun gameplay for me, and I'm happy to talk about it because right now it's actually feels like it's in a really good position. So for the people that have not played Modern for the last, I don't know, at least 2 3 years, possibly maybe even more. If you're not familiar with Death Shadow, the Death Shadow archetypes all are based around this card right here, Death Shadow. Death Shadow is a 13/13 for 1 mana that gets -X/-X, where X is your life total. So for this thing to even be able to stay on the board and not die to state-based actions, and without any other buffs to its power and toughness, you need to be at 12 life, and this thing's a 1/1. Now, it seems kind of weird where you're like, well, isn't, shouldn't your keep your life total high? Isn't that kind of a thing that you want to be doing? Well, in this case, for the Death Shadow deck, your life is the ultimate resource because it controls the power and toughness of probably your best threat and probably one of the best threats in Modern in terms of rate. So, what are we trying to do when we're playing this deck? Basically, you want to get your life total as low as you can comfortably be at. While it might be tempting to oh, I can go down to 3 life by turn 3. That's great if you're killing your opponent the next turn and then they're also not killing you the next turn. So a lot of this deck, and I think it's probably now the most skill intensive deck you can play, just for the sheer fact of the decisions that you make from the time that you sit down to the time the match is over, they all matter. It literally, I've lost games because I've made one small mistake, and I've won games because I've avoided making those same small mistakes or capitalizing on a mistake that my opponent's made. And this is how swingy this deck can be, is that one small decision either wins you the game or loses you the game. And while it can be frustrating, it's also very rewarding if you're a player that really wants to just become a better player in general because of the power level of this deck and how much those micro decisions actually matter. So, how are we playing this bad boy? Well, first we're gonna look at the lands because that's kind of important. Playing a place that have Bloodstained Mire, Polluted Delta, and then 2 Scalding Tarn. We're playing 17 lands, so 10 of them being fetch lands allow us to get our shock lands that come into play, that we ideally want to come into play on tap, and deal 3 total damage to ourselves. So basically, the 2 Water Grave, 2 Blood Crypt, 1 Steam Vents. Kind of goes back and forth between 2 Watery Grave, 1 Blood Crypt, 1 Steam Vents, and then playing an additional fetch land. I don't think either version is wrong. I prefer playing the extra shock land over the extra fetch land, and I haven't run into any problems casting Death Shadow or anything like that, or at least anything different from the 11 fetch version versus the 10 fetch version, which is really no difference whatsoever. Also, as a side note, if you don't have Scalding Tarns, you can play some other blue fetch land. It just has to be able to search out Steam Vents and Watery Grave reliably. I'm sure you could probably play Verdant to get the Grave or the Blood Crypt, but really Scalding Tarn or Misty Rainforest, anything like that, are pretty good, and probably the ones that you want to be playing if you don't have Scalding Tarn. So the land base helps us out a lot because we can go down to 14 on turn 2 with 2 lands. Street Wraith is one of those creatures that helps us too because we can pay 2 life and discard to cycle, essentially making it so we have a 56 card deck. And then the spells that kind of help us get to a lower life total. Thoughtseize is just a 1 mana discard spell. If you fetch Shock Thoughtseize on turn 1, you're down to 15 life already, which means that another fetch line lets you cast a Death Shadow. Or Fetch Shock Cycle Street Wraith is also a way that you can get to 15 on that turn as well, to then set up for a fetch land plus like Death Shadow the following turn. The spells are kind of what's important. We'll go over the threats in a second because those are obviously the most important. But these things essentially are like the tools that help you figure out how the heck am I going to win this game. So 3 Fatal Pushes, 1 Drown in the Lock, 2 Dismember, and Kolaghan's Command are essentially like the removal slash like flex spells in the deck. Obviously, Fatal Push is just great because you play a ton of fetch lands, so you're almost always triggering Revolt. So you're basically destroying anything 4 or greater, or 4 or more, excuse me, the majority of the time that this card's in your hand, which obviously deals with like a lot of the threats in the mirror. Unrevolted destroys a lot of like the smaller creatures and like the prowess decks and the burn decks, which is really sweet. And then some of the other like Azusas and things like that also die to Fatal Push as well. Obviously a Revolted one, which again is 95% of the time no problem. Drown in the Lock is recently as in like when it came out new. It's a counter spell and a removal spell, but it counters or removes the creature or spell if its converted mana cost is equal to or greater than equal to or less than the number of cards in that spell's controller's graveyard. While it seems like it's kind of counterintuitive, like this is just a counter spell and a removal spell that scales up as like the game goes along. Death Shadow is generally a deck that from the opening hand you kind of decide like, am I an aggro deck? Am I a control deck? Am I going to try to like combo them out by like Death Shadow plus Temur Battle Rage or Gurmag Angler plus Temur Battle Rage, anything like that, as like the kind of stuff they have to think about. So really Drown the Lock is something that like if you need to kill like a 2 or 3 cost creature, it does that. If you needed to counter a 2 or 3 cost spell, it does that. If you needed to counter an 8 or 9, later in the game, it does that as well. Dismember is also a way that we can get our life total super low, where if you just fetch Shock Dismember a Birds of Paradise or a Noble Hierarch, you can go down to 13 life, and now your Death Shadows are 3/3s with another fetch land, or 2/2s if you play Shock Land on that turn, which is still really good, just playing 2/2/2s that end up scaling as you just draw more fetch lands to make them bigger. Going to the discard, which there's only really like 6, technically 7, because I left off Kolaghan's Command. Inquisition, Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is your best one because you lose life and it takes any card. Inquisition is just a really good, like gets anything 3 or less. Helps you set up for like the early turns. Obviously they're not great to draw late game, but like these are probably like the best discard spells to be playing in the format. Kolaghan's Command is shock, a discard, a shatter, and then a unearth, or not unearth. Just a way to pick up a creature from graveyard to your hand. Plenty of times playing with this card, that like I've picked up a Street Wraith to grow a Death Shadow, or use Kolaghan's Command to like smash an Aether Vial and get back a Death Shadow, or like even pick up a Snapcaster Mage, things like that. Like Kolaghan's Command is just very versatile, and it's one of those cards that it is technically in a flex spot. But I think right now with how the format looks, especially if we could potentially see some bans in the Titan deck, Kolaghan's Command definitely goes up in equity in my opinion. Temur Battle Rage is the combo portion of the deck, and kind of what I alluded to earlier. Death Shadow can be like an 8/8 or a 9/9 sometimes, so like swinging with a 9/9 double strike trampler is pretty good, and I only know because the Titan players get to swing with an 8/6 double strike trampler, but theirs has vigilance too. But sometimes it doesn't matter when your opponent just dies to your 9/9 or 10/10 double striking trampling creature. Card's really good. Uh, Most people play like Embercleave, not in like the shadow decks, but like in the other like red decks, because it's a repeatable double strike trampling and even gives you a buff. But like most of the time, we only ever have like 1 or 2 creatures on board, and we only have like 2 or 3 lands, so the card would remain largely uncastable and not very reliable to equip to anything because people have to answer our threats. Um, Lastly, like rounding out the spells, 4 Stubborn Denial, 4 Thought Scour. Thought Scours feel Gurmag Angler, which I'll get to here in a second, and it draws you a card, it cantrips. Stubborn Denial is just 1 mana like hard negate a lot of the time, and then some of the times even it being a like a force spike for non-creature spells is pretty good. The Royal Scions does kind of a lot of things. It basically plays as like a third battle rage because it gives our thing trample and instead of double strike, it gives first strike instead, which a lot of the times does come up where you can just like kill your opponent's creature and then deal 2 or 3 damage to them, and then like they kind of just get blown out in combat because nobody really knows what this card does. And the very first time I played this card and I +1 to give a shadow 2/0 first strike and trample, my opponent blocked with a Fulminator Mage, went to blow up my land, and then told him to take 9, which was lethal. So sometimes you can kind of get people because they just don't pay attention. Even when you like tell them what this card does, they just don't really pay attention to it. Also, draw discard gives you some more filtering. Of course, like the ultimate, you're probably not killing your opponent with it, but like drawing 4 cards and then possibly dealing upwards of like 5, 6, 7 damage to your opponent is pretty good. Creatures, obviously, 4 Death Shadow, best threat in Modern given the rate. Gurmag Angler, a lot of times you can play on turn 2 as a 5/5. Still pretty good as a turn 2 threat. Snapcaster Mage just gives you some more value and some more utility out of your threats. It basically adds 1 more copy of like all of these spells down here, which all of them are really good. And your opponent just has to respect Snapcaster Mage as a card from your deck anyway. So like playing 3 of them is fine. Like sometimes it feels bad to play as an Ambush Viper, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just good to get some extra value out of like a Thoughtseize or a Stubborn Denial, things like that. So Snapcaster Mage is definitely really, really good in my book. Also, I don't think I got to it. Mishra's Bauble is in this deck because we basically get to go from 60 cards to 52 between Street Wraith and Bauble. You can do some tricks with Bauble where like you Bauble yourself, and if you have a fetch land and a shock land, and then you like the card on top that you see with Bauble, you can choose to play the shock land and then play your turn normal that way, and then drawing the card that's on top on your opponent's turn. Or if you don't like that card, you can just play a fetch land and then loot it away and essentially set yourself up for a blind draw, hopefully not drawing the card that you just topped with the Mishra's Bauble. The sideboard is pretty crazy for this deck because there's, with the diversity of Modern and how it generally is, you're kind of just like picking and choosing what decks that you want to lose to and what decks do you really want to have a better matchup in. So, a Braid gives you some utility against like the Titan decks and then multiple different Urza decks. Damping Sphere, Disdainful Stroke, like Drown the Lock, Ashiok, even like Mystical Disputes, things like that. All these cards are definitely cards that you want against like the Titan and like Urza decks, just because like they scale up. Ashiok stops the Titan decks from being able to search their library. Drown the Lock can eventually kill a prime time. A lot of times they can even just counter one or counter their 2 or 3 drop, which is pretty good. Damping Sphere, while it seems like it's counterintuitive with like all the ones and twos that we play in the deck, it usually just hurts our opponent way more than it hurts us, and our clock is so fast that making it so we can only play like a hard 1 spell a turn is usually just fine with us. Brutality, really good against Burn and the aggro mono red decks, the more traditional mono red decks that aren't technically considered Burn. Gains you life, weird to say in a deck that really wants to have a low life total, but sometimes making your opponent do an extra 2 points of damage is all it takes. Can pick off a creature, sometimes it ends up getting a card out of their hand, but mostly you're probably choosing the -2/-2 or the opponent loses 2 life, gains 2 life. Surgical Extraction. So with the Urza decks playing more of the Thopter Sword combo and going back to the more traditional as in like pre-Oko Urza decks, like you need some kind of graveyard hate. Dredge is starting to come back, so like tagging like a Dredger or their sword while it's in the graveyard is pretty good, and losing 2 life also hurts pretty good when you're playing a card named Death Shadow. Plague Engineer. If your opponent manages to go infinite with the Thopter Sword combo, you can just name Thopter, and your opponent can just gain life, and that's about it. So, I mean, it's still not great because you have to somehow find a way to be infinite life, and honestly, I don't think you can. But, like, this at least, like, stops your opponent from getting to build a massive army of Thopters just by naturally sacrificing their own pieces to just catch them and try to kill you because our life total is super low all the time. Kolaghan's Command, the second copy is really good against the Urza decks because sometimes just like shattering their artifact or they think that they deal with your threat and then you just get to pick another threat back up, or like even a little bit of reach that it offers in a game in a match like that that's so grindy. Kolaghan's Command just gives you so much value and ends up just being like the ultimate 2-for-1 in those matchups. And that's like the gist of Grixis Death Shadow for the modern format. This deck is awesome. I really love playing it. I've played the deck like I couldn't even tell you like how many matches I've actually played with this deck. It's awesome. It creates a lot of fun gameplay patterns that I like. Sometimes it's ultimate feel bads because you just kind of get run over sometimes, but other times you like run your opponent over, and then in the middle you have like these grindy games where like all your decisions matter rather than not really having a decision that doesn't matter, which sometimes also can feel bad when you sit there for a few minutes tanking on a decision and then ultimately find out it doesn't matter. In Death Shadow, like you have like a non-zero amount of times where your decision really doesn't matter, but there's definitely a higher percentage of the time where those decisions actually matter versus not mattering. So that's gonna do it for this video on Grixis Death Shadow, my favorite deck of all time. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech and my rambling because I'm super passionate about this deck and I love it. So I hope you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out some of the other modern, Pioneer, and Standard decks that I'm doing on the channel right now. Like I said, I'm going to have Pioneer going up tomorrow, and then I'm going to have Standard going up on Friday with another, like, kind of cool-ish video, or at least, like, exciting for me, going up either Thursday or Friday, which will probably end up getting uploaded alongside Pioneer or Standard, whichever deck, whichever day that I feel like uploading it. But I appreciate you guys checking out the channel. Appreciate you guys watching the deck techs. Watch more of them. Get in there. Really get into these formats. These formats are hot right now. Modern's kind of going through this new revelation with Oko and with Mox Opal being gone. Like Pioneer's just a sweet format, and like Standard got a new set, and it seems like it's going to be really cool. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in